Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to The Brian Nichols Show. Well, hey there, folks. Welcome to today's episode of The Brian Nichols Show. I am, as always, your humble host, joining you from our lovely Cardio Miracle Studios here in sunny Eastern Indiana. The Brian Nichols Show is powered by the best heart health supplement in the world, Cardio Miracle. So, you want to learn how to lower your resting heart rate, lower your blood pressure while improving your pump at the gym, just like I did. Stick around. We'll talk about that later in today's episode, or simply scan that little QR code over my shoulder or head to cardiomiracle.com/TBNS. You'll know you're in the right spot when you see a little notice at the top of your browser saying you're shopping with Brian Nichols. And that means also you'll get 15% off your order. One more time, Cardio Miracle, the best heart health supplement in the world. But let's jump right into today's topic of conversation. What does the conservative movement, the Republican Party, look like in a post-Charlie Kirk world? Right now, AmFest is actually taking place as we're recording here today, and we're kind of seeing the different divisions taking place unfold right now. So we're going to discuss that, but also how Christianity today is going to help change the culture, hopefully at the very least here in America moving forward. And also, what does revival look like here in the United States? We're discussing all that and more. Chris Widener, welcome back to the Brian Nichols Show. How you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. Second appearance.
I know, second appearance. Welcome back to the show. I think last time was right before, it was either right before the midterms or right after the midterms in 22, somewhere in that time frame. So, Chris, a lot's been going on in the world. Obviously, we won the White House, right? But now we're seeing a lot of question marks. Where's the movement headed, especially in a post-Charlie Kirk world? But before we jump into that, do us a favor. First and foremost, reintroduce yourself to the Brian Nichols Show audience, because there's been a lot of folks who've joined the audience in the past 3 years. So who are you and what do you do?
Well, I'll give you the short little version. My dad died when I was 4. I had a crazy upbringing. My mother had borderline personality disorder. So I lived in 28 homes, went to 11 different schools. I was shipped off to live with relatives twice, once in the 4th grade, once in the 9th grade. Started drugs in the 6th grade and made most of my money growing up betting the horses at Long Acres Horse Track outside of Seattle. So that was the first act. Then I became a Christian summer before my senior year of high school, went to Bible college, became a pastor for 14 years, 3 as a youth minister, 11 as a church planter in Seattle. And then in 2002, I started writing and speaking full time. Ended up getting 3 of the greatest mentors in the speaking world. I worked for 2 years with John Maxwell, ghost wrote for John, and then I spent 2 years co-hosting the Zig Ziglar television show. Anybody 50 and over knows that Zig is the guy that pioneered the whole industry. And then I spent 7 years working with a guy named Jim Rohn. And some people love Jim Rohn, some people never heard of Jim Rohn, and then some people think that I'm saying Jim Rome, the guy from ESPN. But Jim gave Tony Robbins his first job. When Tony was 17, he started working with Jim. And so about a year and a half ago, I went back to my roots. I went back into full-time ministry, closed a business down, gave a business over to my partner, sold a business, and burned all the boats, and wrote a book called The Coming American Revival. And it was very well received. I gave the very first copy to President Trump, and he wrote me a really nice letter about it. So that's kind of cool. Senator Tim Scott is the cover endorsement on the book, but other folks that your audience might know, John Rich, for example, from Big and Rich, he endorsed the book, and Kirk Cameron and Kevin Sorbo and all those guys. So right now I'm involved in revival ministry because I really believe that our problem in America is not our political problem. Our real problem in America is our spiritual problem, and our spiritual problem creates the political problem. And so that's my whole work right now.
Yeah, I've been hearing a lot of pastors, especially I've been listening to a lot of Mark Driscoll out of the church down there in Phoenix. Oh goodness, the name of his
Scottsdale. It's Scottsdale, Arizona. It's Trinity Church.
Trinity Church, thank you. Yes.
I used to live in Scottsdale for 6 years. So
okay, gotcha. So yeah, you're familiar. And I've been listening to him talk about today being modern day Babylon in many instances. And you see it, right? We see it in our culture, the OnlyFans mentality. We see this pervasive. I think that the number I saw most recent, which was still horrifying, is that 1 in 5 Gen Z girls is on OnlyFans. That's 20%. That's stomach turning. It's tragic as a girl dad knowing that, and it just makes me really weep for the future if that's the case, coupled with you look at a younger generation of boys who have grown up, and we just saw this piece come out over at Compact Magazine basically outlining from 2014 onward, which is right when I graduated college. You saw this, not only it was a discrimination, but it was an open and publicly discussed discrimination against white men. So you couple the complete just abdication of morals on a lot of the younger generation on the female side of the aisle, and then you couple that with just the complete, like, just shutting down the kind of the drug video game porn culture on the men's side. And I see a lot of young men who are just looking for some type of guidance or some type of person they can look to. And what I see is, Chris, a lot of these young men are going towards folks like a Myron Gaines or a Nick Fuentes or someone like an Andrew Tate. Much more of this bro, not even bro kind of mentality, but like more of because there's the podcast bros, but then I guess it's more of like the manosphere kind of vibe that's perpetuated online. Yeah. And you see a lot of young men who I think they're seeing that as an unfortunate personification of what masculinity looks like versus what we see in the Bible as masculinity and what the true roles of men as leaders are in the Bible and how that actually manifests in our day-to-day, right? And we're seeing right now a complete abdication of leadership from a lot of young men, but it's not just the young men today. I would look even back to the boomers, especially looking at the problems we're facing today. A lot of these problems started with generations from past, from other weak men who, they weren't following the word of God and leading by example and taking on the hardships, right? Like knowing, hey, the tree that we're planting today will bloom and provide the shade for the generation of tomorrow. It was much more of what's in it for me, right? Which, listen, I get it as a sales guy. It's interesting when we talk about the younger generation. So first of all, OnlyFans is not done in a vacuum, right? For every girl on OnlyFans, there's 10 to 1,000 men that are subscribing, or 10,000 or 1 million, depending upon who the person is. So it's not just the girls. The girls are doing it, I think. They want to do it for money, obviously, whatever. But I think there's deeper root causes of that, like identity, a misunderstanding of human sexuality, because we have to understand that God created sex. Yep. Like the church is always like, sex is bad, sex is bad, sex is bad, sex is bad, sex is bad. And, oh, you're married? Sex is great. And it sends these conflicting things, right? Like, and that's true that sex should be within the confines of a marriage as God defined it and created it. But I mean, if you think about it, and I don't want to be sensationalistic here, but God created the orgasm, right? I mean, like God made it amazing thing for a man and a woman to experience together, to bring them together, to enjoy together, to create unity, to create love between each other, to create babies, to establish families. So here's what I always say. God is a creator and Satan is a distorter. So most of the things that have gone awry are things that God created to be good things, but then Satan comes in and kind of twists them because God gives them to us for fulfillment and a closer relationship with him and, a great life. Mm-hmm. In fact, my life verse is John 10:10. The thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I've come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. Now, with my background growing up, I was looking for an abundant life, but I was looking at it in all the wrong places. And I was angry and bitter. I didn't have an identity. My dad had died. I had no male role models, all those kinds of things. So I think the same thing with the men in the younger generation. They're also looking for identity. They're looking for what their role is in life. What does it mean to be a man when the whole culture around you is telling you about toxic masculinity and all these things? This is all the more reason why the church needs to get involved and teaching people what real biblical manhood is. And it's not wimpy, milk toast kind of guys, but it's also like a lot of these guys are like, I'm going to be a Christian male influencer. Okay, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to get a tat. I'm going to grow a beard that's 12 inches long. I'm going to buy a Harley, even if my wife doesn't want me to, because I'm the man of that. That's not really truly what biblical manhood is. I always go back to King David. The amount of variance in King David's life was really interesting. On one hand, he's 14 years old. He sees this giant. Everybody else is afraid. And he goes, give me some rocks. Like, let's take care of this guy.
and he had wrestled bear and lion, which is why he was not afraid of this 9-foot giant. He's like, and he only needed one, and I read something interesting the other day. Why did David get 5 rocks? It's because Goliath had 4 brothers. He only needed one for David or for Goliath, but he brought 4 extras in case the other guys went a little crazy. So on one hand, you have that he killed, he was a warrior, all those kinds of things. But on the other hand, he wrote poetry and played the harp. Mm-hmm. The spectrum of manhood doesn't always look like the killer.
Yep.
Sometimes it looks like the artist. And sometimes there's a blend that people have in it. And I find that really interesting. And again, you have people that glom onto one side of it, and then that's everything. But you miss all the rest that's part of manhood.
Yeah. And by the way, going to the art side of things, I think so that I've heard pastors use the term like the thin space where between you kind of have our world and then God's world, right? The unseen that we call heaven, but it's whatever that other world is. And how you look back to the Bible, there were thin spaces where people were able to better communicate with God. And I firmly believe that when you go into more of that artistic zone, I think you kind of get into that thin space yourself. At least I find myself, right, where you start to almost get out of your own brain. You start to almost get out of your own body, right? You're focusing on whatever the art is. So for me, it was music. It was singing. It was playing piano, playing tuba. It was you and I were talking before we hit record, right? So like it was things like that where I would really get into the zone. And all right, it's the holidays, which means we're all doing that annual dance, pretending that we love this time of year while secretly we're running on stress, sugar, and whatever's left of our sanity. You've got the office parties, the family gatherings, the flights, the long lines, the weird cookie that Aunt Carol made. And on top of that, the weather's colder, you're eating heavier, you're sleeping less, and your immune system is basically sending you texts saying like, hey buddy, I'm not okay. And let's be real, December has a way of exposing everything your body has already been struggling with. Low energy, amplified. Brain fog, doubled. Circulation, frozen like your car windshield. And don't even get me started on inflammation after you've had your 5th helping of just a little more at dinner. See, that's where Cardio Miracle comes in. It gives your body that one thing the holidays steal the most, nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is actually what helps the blood flow. It helps oxygen reach your cells, support your immune system, and helps your body bounce back from the stress, the sugar, the travel, the cold weather, all of it. And I've been drinking it every day, morning and night, because I don't have time to crash halfway through the month. And Cardio Miracle keeps me steady, clear-headed, energized, and able to actually enjoy the holidays instead of just survive them. So if you want to give yourself the gift of not feeling like you're worn out at Christmas, just go ahead and scan the QR code over my shoulder, click that little link in the show notes, or visit cardiomiracle.com/TBNS to grab yours. And by the way, you'll get 15% off at checkout. And now, let's get back to the show. I felt just very much closer to God. And it's weird to put it into words like that, but also, I mean, think to your professional athletes, how many, athletes we see that will, Dak Prescott, right? One of my favorite quarterbacks, right now he'll kiss and point to the sky, right? Honoring God and his deceased mother. And like that right there, you see athletes who they'll kind of get into the zone and it's interesting how there is kind of this artistic, blend with, we call it God, right? Because I think that it's profoundly true. But you'll see folks who they approach the world through more of an atheistic lens or an agnostic lens, and maybe they are more artistic, but they're very spiritual more often than not.
Think about music. Music is a spiritual concept.
Absolutely.
There was music in heaven prior to the creation of man. And when we read the New Testament about what's going to happen in heaven, there's worship. And there's music. And so music is a spiritual thing. I mean, music isn't a physical thing. You can't pour music back and forth in a beaker like this, right? It's not something you can do science with.
Right.
It's an ethereal thing. It's a spiritual thing.
In the sales world, I call it you can't put it on the warm and fuzzy meter. right?
Right. Yeah. And so think about this. God created music and Satan distorted it. Last night, my wife bought tickets to a thing that we went to. It was a candlelight service in a church here in Chattanooga. And the music was the music of Vivaldi, Four Seasons. I wrote a book called Four Seasons about a billionaire who had found out he had 1 year left to live. And every scene in the book is based off of the mood of one of the parts of Vivaldi's Four Seasons. So she knows that I love it. We go there. And it was amazing and beautiful and violins and, the whole thing. But then that's on one end of the spectrum, like good music. And then you have like the music that is filled with misogyny and pimps and hoes and murder and death and drugs. And, I was telling you before we got on that I worked as a ball boy for the Seattle Supersonics, 1977 to 1984, which was at the birth of rap. And rap music back then was about hanging out on the street corner, hanging out with your friends, like about as bad as they got. They'd say, and we were drinking a 40. Like that was as bad as it got. And now you have this total degradation in the rap world. And again, I think it goes back to creation and distortion. Music is a powerful, powerful thing because it's spiritual.
Yeah, no, 100% is. And by the way, just going back to the cultural side of things where the spiritual impact the cultural, this is something back to September 9th, right? A world before what happened on September 10th happened, which was the assassination of Charlie Kirk, right? Like this was something that Charlie Kirk was having such success with, going campus to campus, and really he was impacting the culture because Charlie was embodying by the manifestation of the Holy Spirit, the best way to approach these issues, to challenge ideas in the marketplace of ideas, let the best ideas come out and win, and let the bad ideas be exposed, right? And it was so refreshing to see him not just go out and have dialogue and change people's minds, but you would see the moments where there would be someone who would have a vast disagreement with Charlie, both in terms of politics or philosophy, but Charlie always approached treating those individuals with respect, with dignity. He was always conscious of going out of his way to make sure that when there was a conflicting viewpoint brought up, that everybody else was respectful and let that voice heard. And that's something that on September 10th, I had when we all saw what happened, and beyond the tragedy of the loss of him as a person, as a father, as a husband, as a man of God, to see that, I wept inside because I felt we were losing that person who represented what good dialogue looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember my favorite clip of him ever, just as in terms of the humanity, was there was a young man in college. He had I think he had stud in his nose and earrings and the whole thing. And then you had his dad with him, and his dad looked like an FBI agent, like hair above his ears and, super short cropped hair. Like you could totally see him as an accountant or an FBI agent. And the dad spoke to Charlie. They were up at the microphone, as he did. And he said, "We need your advice. We are political. We are totally opposites. We are polarized as far as you can get. And it's starting to affect our relationship. And I love my son and he loves me. What is your advice?" And Charlie said, "Quit talking about politics. There is nothing more important than your son and father relationship. Do not talk politics. You both know where you stand. You both disagree. Now stop talking about it because it will hurt your relationship." And the people who say, "Oh, he just tried to stir the pot and all these kinds, and he hated people," and it just simply wasn't true.
No. Well, and now the question is, what's next, right? Like as you and I are recording here today, AmFest is taking place, which is the Turning Point event that takes place every year. And this is the first one post Charlie. And we're seeing right now, really it's the two camps in the greater conservative movement. And by the way, just mad respect beyond what Charlie was able to do in terms of outreach, but also just in terms of building coalitions and holding relationships together across such different groups of folks, right? And to see where we are today, like you have Ben Shapiro start the event, basically declaring war on the Tucker Carlson side and the Candace Owens side of the aisle, the Megyn Kelly side. I'm actually kind of surprised that Megyn Kelly got into this whole thing, but here she is as well. And you see it's much more the Ben Shapiro's, the Daily Wire, the and I hate that it's really come down to more of like this, also this Israel thing, like underlying Israel conversation. And I'm just not really sure how this has all kind of come together with, the whole Candace going through the conspiracy theories of what happened to Charlie, coupled that with Tucker Carlson obviously not being on board with our relationship with Israel. And then you look at the other side, obviously Ben Shapiro has vested interest in our relationship with Israel. And I get it. He's a Orthodox Jew. I understand why he would. There's all these different conflicting sides now, and all of a sudden, it's all being on display, right, for the world.
Well, and here's the problem. And they went to war last night. And the funny thing is Ben went first. And I don't know that I would want to get into a slapping match with Tucker and give him the last word. But neither Ben nor Tucker hold a biblical worldview of Israel. And I have I have relationships with both of them, but neither one of them holds a biblical worldview. So Ben is Israel first, Israel only, and yes, I'm an American, but I'm only an American to the degree that it benefits Israel. Tucker holds, and I don't even know that he would say this. I don't know if he even knows the term, but Tucker holds to what's called replacement theology. Mm-hmm. And replacement theology says, well, the Jews were the chosen people in the Old Testament. The church is the chosen people in the New Testament. And therefore, that's why Tucker looks at Israel and says, who cares? It's an insignificant country. It's a tiny little country. Why do we care about them but not Brazil? Or why do we care about them but not this country? The biblical worldview about Israel is that God established a covenant, not a contract, a covenant with Israel, with Abraham, to create a great nation out of them that would bless the rest of the world, and that they were his chosen people, and they are always his chosen people. So then people say, well, what about the church? Well, this is where if you go and you read through Romans chapter 9 through 11, it explains the whole thing. And it talks about this tree, and the tree is Israel, and the bad branches were cut off, and then the church is grafted into the tree. So the chosen people is the tree. It always includes faith-filled Jews, but it also then grafted in is the church, so that we're all God's people. And in the end, those faithful Jews and the faithful Christians will be that tree. And that's the biblical worldview, straight out of Romans chapter 9, verse 11, the context of the Old Testament, the covenant that was made. A covenant cannot be broken. And so God made an everlasting covenant with the Jews. So to me, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to agree with everything the Israeli government does. I'm not anti-Semitic if I disagree with the Israeli government any more than I'm anti-American if I think Trump did something wrong. It's a false. False way of looking at things. So, it is really sad that Israel has become sort of the striking point there to light the match and cause the problems, not only within political people, but even within religious people.
Yeah, well, and maybe it's just my, I call it self-centered, right? View, but I just view that our issues here at home are so much more important than a lot of the issues we see from a foreign policy perspective. Not to say that foreign policy is not important, but rather we are so just domestically broken right now. Totally. When you look at how just inflated our bureaucracies are, the regulatory state, you factor in the exorbitant government spending and the government taxing, and it leaves a lot of people, Chris, who are they're disheartened with government, and they look at government inherently as broken and flawed, and they don't trust the solutions. And as someone in the business space, like I work in unified communications, and I work in helping companies replace their phone systems, right? And one of the number one things I replace is broken relationships, right? Because you'll have an existing vendor who drops the ball. And one of the things we sell against, and this isn't a commercial for my day job, but like, we lead with no contracts. The big guys that are the big names out there, they lead with 3 to 5 year contracts. So what happens is you get into a contract, something goes wrong, you say, hey, fix it. They say, we will eventually. And you say, okay, well, I'm going to leave. And they say, yeah, you will in 5 years. Right. And that right there is how they'll keep you stuck. And that destroys trust. So when I go in, I'm in more instances than not, it's not that I'm doing a price war or I'm doing a feature war. It is, I am doing a trust war, right? It's where I'm going to be able to show that my solution is going to be better because we're able to build trust, and I'm able to show trust through not only a good solution, but I'm not keeping you handcuffed. So when I use that example where you look at government, there is no replacement for government. There is no alternative. You can't just be like, okay, where's my, here's my public option. Here's my private option. I'm going to go to the private option and say the public option isn't doing too hot, right? And that right there alone builds mistrust because now I don't have choice. And then you factor into the fact behind the scenes, all the stuff that goes into where our priorities are placed. And just your average person, I just think is so done. They're just so done with politics, with government. And I think your average person is so burnt out. It leads to a lot of the rise of the alternatives in the culture, which I'm a little nervous because I see a lot of young men who they're being just crapped on for the past 20 years is going to start manifesting in policy. I think it's going to start manifesting in how they vote, and it's going to start manifesting in how we start to go through public policy. I think there's going to be very real consequences to that. So,
well, and I think it was John Adams that said, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but that the Constitution, the government of the United States is suited only for a religious and moral people.
Amen.
And so the Constitution was rooted in their understanding of Christianity. I mean, the three branches of government were to equate the Godhead, the Trinity, and I think it's called Blackstone's Book of Law, which they took most of their stuff from, which was rooted in Christianity. Yep. And so I agree with you. I think that America is perilously close, far more than the average American can actually understand, to utter destruction and collapse. When I ran for the U.S. Senate in 2010, 15 years ago, our debt was $9 trillion.
Jeez.
It's 38. And I used to play it up. Like when I would go and give speeches at these town halls, I'd say, we're $9 trillion in debt. That means every person is and I can't remember what the number was, $120,000 in debt. And I'd say, sir, you're $120,000. Ma'am, you're $120,000. And I'd always try to find a pregnant lady. And I'd say, ma'am, you're $120,000 in debt. And your baby, who hasn't even been born yet, is $120,000 in debt. The collapse of the economy, the real estate market, and that's just, inflation and debt and all these kinds of things. That doesn't even go into the things like the one thing that I am blessedly shocked that hasn't happened yet is some sort of an EMP. Like we talk about nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons are not the most dangerous thing for us. I mean, yeah, they could kill us, but we have defense systems and, all the kinds of things. An EMP properly placed would literally put us back into the dark ages.
Yep.
Overnight. Cars won't work, phones won't work, computers won't work. We would be completely and totally decimated. And I'm shocked.
Millions lost in like days, just for context. I mean, think of all the people who are being kept alive by medical equipment, right? Like that's all
within 24 hours.
I mean, and literally it will be, big cities collapse. You're right. This is like a true. People think of a nuke because it's the big, like it's the Hollywood sexy disaster, right? Like mushroom cloud, like just sonic boom, Terminator, where she's just on fire at the kids park, right? Like that's the mentality people have, but you don't think of an EMP and then just like, oh, no electricity. Oh, society collapses.
Yeah. For 50 years again. Right. And then everybody panics. They need food. There's guns. Like all of a sudden people start killing each other. I'm telling you that's the real danger. Something like that, or some sort of computer virus that wipes our systems out, stops, because all of our water and our sanitation and they're all run on computer systems.
Yep.
Our drinking water would be bad within hours. It's pretty terrifying, which is all the more reason why I believe that we need to turn our hearts back to God, because I truly believe that one of the reasons we find ourselves in this place is because we've turned away from God.
Amen.
And my book, The Coming American Revival, I do a sort of a historical analysis of the 5 great revivals in American history, and they come every 50 to 75 years. And the last great revival in America was 1970-ish. It was popularized in the movie Jesus Revolution. It was the beginnings of the Calvary Chapel movement. Chuck Smith, our greatest evangelist now in America after Billy Graham died, a guy named Greg Laurie, came out of that. And so now here we are 55 years out, and we've already talked about societal ills, and we look at everything, and people are just turning away from God. They're seeking answers in science, and I do not believe that science and faith are that they're not merged. I believe that great faith makes for great science, and great science makes for great faith.
Amen.
Because all truth is God's truth. But I really believe the only thing that will save America is not the right politician, but the church turning its heart back to God and living the way that it's supposed to live.
I have spent too many years watching as my generation, the millennial generation, have so abdicated any responsibility for where we are today. I've seen boomers get blamed a lot, and there's a lot of deserved finger pointing at the boomers, but the millennial generation also, we were the generation of, and it goes back to, folks who remember, there was this this video that was going viral of Sydney Sweeney being interviewed, and it was like the smarmy millennial versus the just jaded Gen Zer, right? And that's kind of the approach we've, in many instances, enabled by not asking questions. Because my generation, unfortunately, was a generation that was everybody gets a trophy, right? And that was kind of the mentality that was fostered by a lot of folks. The folks who didn't deserve a trophy and got it, yep, they were like, woohoo, I love this. Whereas the folks who were like, I got first place. Yes, I should have got a trophy, but you're getting a trophy too, and you're 8th place. That pissed off a lot of folks, right? And I point
or even worse, I came in 2nd place in the women's division, and you're a man, but you took 1st place. Like, that's even weirder.
Weirder, and the fact that there are so many folks who are just like, yeah, that's not anything to be concerned about. That's a no-brainer. I'm like, there's definitely no brain in one of these conversations being had, but it's not on this side of the aisle. But
we're going to have a heavyweight fight where one of them is 220 and the other's 140. Okay.
Oh God. And people will scream equality, which is the sad part. But I do hope, to your point, Chris, we're seeing there is a younger generation that is starting to, I think, push back, right? Like, we're seeing a revival in Gen Z men going back to church.
Not just men, but women is college kids. And I'll tell you why this is happening.
Please.
So, because college campuses right now, my daughter goes to this thing called the Passion Conference every year. They have 60,000 people show up for this thing, college kids, down in Atlanta. This year, I think it's in Dallas. Lou Giglio is the guy that puts it on. But if you think about it, there's a book in the Old Testament called Ecclesiastes, and it was written by Solomon. And Solomon was the richest man to ever live. And Ecclesiastes is his record of him trying to go and find meaning in life. So here he is. He's the richest guy that's ever lived, the richest guy on earth at that time. And he decides, I'm going to go and I'm going to try and find purpose in drinking. I'm going to find it in building gardens. I'm going to find it in building buildings. I'm going to find it in humor. And he just goes everywhere he can to try to feel fulfilled. And at the end, he concludes that there's only 2 things: love God and obey his commandments. Those are the only things that bring happiness. So now take a look at the college kids of today. Now, I don't know about what you were like when you were growing up, but, I started drinking in the 6th grade, started weed in the 6th, 7th grade. I've never even been in the same room as cocaine. I've never even seen cocaine. Like all those kinds of drugs, like I smoked pot and drank cheap beer. That's what we did in high school and college. Well, not college. I went to Bible college, but college kids at my age did that. But now you look at these kids, and these are kids that are going to some of the most prestigious schools in America that come from families that are worth tens of millions of dollars. These kids are sleeping around to the tune of 12, 15, 20 people a year.
Jesus.
They're taking drugs that you and I had never even heard of. They're not only doing weed, but they're doing fentanyl, they're doing cocaine, they're doing LSD, they're doing ayahuasca. And what does that tell you? It tells you they're looking for meaning and identity. And so now in a kind of a sad way, but God always wins, right? They go through all this stuff, they sleep around, they take every drug they possibly can, they drink till they're blackout drunk, and then they go, I'm completely and totally bankrupt. Where's the truth? Where's the meaning? Where's the identity? That's why we're seeing all these college kids turning to God, because they've tried everything else.
God had a funny sense of humor, to say the least. Chris, this has been a great conversation. I've truly enjoyed our chat, and I think there's a lot of folks out there who are listening today. They have the skeptical blinders up, and I understand, because they have been raised in a world where You have been you've been led to be skeptical of God. You've been led to believe that religion is this idea of some giant man in the sky making things happen. No, right? And that's the thing. You make fun of people in religion because in your idea, they are the caricature of what they are presented by.
And frankly, to be honest, the church gives them lots of fodder to work with.
They sure do. They sure do. So it's on both sides. And this will be my final thoughts, and I'll turn things over to you, Chris. For Christians, first and foremost, you got to not be goofy, right? One of the main things we talk about here in the show is to meet people where they're at. And you have to understand Jesus didn't go in and just, start trying to just make, yes, he did make miracles happen. I was going to say make miracles happen. No, actually, Jesus did make miracles happen. He's the one person we can 100% confirm he did. But he went in and he would try to meet the people he was trying to speak to in a way that it was easier for them to understand. It was easier for them to resonate. He spoke their language in a way that it was engaging. It was not threatening. It was not demeaning, right? So don't go in this holier than thou approach. I've seen this a lot from Christians. I grew up as a pastor's kid. I saw it in church. Don't look highly of yourself relative to somebody who's seeking God's forgiveness. They're there for a reason. Embrace that. But on the other side, if you are skeptical, right, just go to church. Ask questions. Don't just take the personification, the characterization of what you think Christians are, or just religion in general is, as the truth. Actually put yourself in the position where you can understand, learn, and make a decision for yourself then. But I guarantee, kind of to Chris's point here, it always comes back to God. And God always ends up winning. But that's my final thoughts. Chris, what do you have for us before we wrap things up today?
Well, I'd love to tell people about something we're doing. I'm not the kind of guy that sees a problem and sits back and goes, well, that's a problem. That's too bad. No, when you see a problem, you do what you can to fix it. And so I've been in the event and speaking business for 38 years now, I guess. I've given 2,500 speeches all over the world, put on big events. So we are putting on an event you can find out about at revival250.com. That's the number 250, revival250.com. Next year is our 250th anniversary of our country. And we're going to have lots of parades and lots of events and lots of celebrations. I believe that we should celebrate the God who founded our country and is the root and the history of our country. So we're putting on what we hope to be the largest single-day revival meeting in American history. We're going to have 15,000 people live in Jacksonville, Florida. And then we're live streaming through the pray.com app. They have 26 million downloads. We've partnered with the National Religious Broadcasters Association. We're going to live stream to homes, churches, colleges, prisons, military bases, and we're going to have a global live stream as well. And our prayer is that we will have at least 50 million people see this and be challenged to understand that our problem isn't a political problem. It's a spiritual problem. And so if you want to go to Revival 250, sign up for the email updates. I only send one a week, no spam. So don't worry about it. It comes out on Wednesdays and you'll be able to be up to date on that. But we're asking people to host watch parties. Host them in your home. It's going to be Sunday, May 3rd from 1 o'clock in the afternoon till 8 o'clock in the evening. We've got great speakers, great musicians. We're going after some of the most well-known, most respected Christian folks in America to challenge us to turn our hearts back to God. So revival250.com.
Links in the show notes. Chris, this has been a great chat. Thank you for coming back on the show. And I know my audience really enjoyed our last chat. And, elephant in the room, since you were last in the show, we've been growing leaps and bounds. And I got to say, a lot of it, I think, is because we've been really approaching these conversations beyond just the political. We've really tried to emphasize the importance of the cultural, of the lack of God in a lot of instances where there has been a replacement of God, or at the very least, folks trying to replace God, right? So to see, this conversation, I think it really does tie together all the different facets that we've been trying to bring here to the Brian Nichols Show. So thank you for that. And folks, if you got some value from today's conversation, you know the drill. Go ahead, give it a share. When you do, you can tag yours truly on X, Facebook, or Instagram at @BNicholsLiberty. As for the show, podcast, video version, wherever it is that you like to catch your podcast content, head over and hit that subscribe button. And of course, we have 3 episodes going live every Monday, Thursday, and Friday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern. So hit that little notification bell so you don't miss a single time we go live there. Again, 9 p.m. Eastern, Monday, Thursdays, and Fridays. Chris, any final words for the audience before we go ahead and wrap things up today?
I think just challenging people to live out their values. We live in a pressure cooker of a country, lots of pressures from all sorts of different areas. Be true to yourself, be transparent, be authentic, and live your life and love people.
Amen. All right, folks. Well, with that being said, we're going to go ahead and put a pin in today's conversation. Brian Nichols signing off here on the Brian Nichols Show for Chris Widener. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.